Imagine the proposition placed before you. A dangerous manuscript, an interview too explosive for its time, deliberately kept from the public for 70 years. At once the ordinary world seems to divide. On one side stand the institutions, guardians, or fearful hands that supposedly concealed it. On the other stand the few who have found it at last. And where are you invited to stand? Among the few, that invitation is the hidden power of the forbidden book story. It offers more than information, it offers initiation. It permits you to feel defiant before you have examined the claim, unusually informed before you have inspected the record, and liberated before you have tested a single idea. The story does not first ask for your reason, it rewards your identity. Beware of any claim that makes belief feel like proof of courage. The phrase banned for 70 years carries drama, danger, and a villain in 5 words. It creates urgency before evidence receives a hearing. It can even bypass skepticism by flattering skepticism itself. You are not gullible, it whispers. You are one of the rare minds willing to discover what others were never meant to know. Thus, suspicion of authority may become submission to a different authority, the authority of the irresistible story. The supply, discovery, performance evidence shows continuing public interest in framings built around outwitting a banned interview and the mystery of a manuscript. That matters. It tells us what captures attention now. It does not tell us what happened then. Audience appetite can demonstrate the power of a legend. It cannot certify the legend's history. So we must keep 3 matters separate: evidence, interpretation, and salesmanship. Evidence concerns what the available record can establish. Interpretation concerns what the book's dramatic form and principles may mean. Salesmanship concerns how mystery is packaged, intensified, and repeated until a possibility begins to sound like settled fact. Confuse these categories, and fascination will pass judgment in advance. But separation is not dismissal. If the legend has been exaggerated, the book does not thereby become worthless. If the book contains useful ideas, the legend does not thereby become true. A weak historical claim cannot erase a sound principle, and the sound principle cannot rescue a weak historical claim. Our purpose, then, is neither to worship Hill nor to wave him away. It is to grant every claim exactly the confidence its support can bear, no more, no less. That is where mental sovereignty begins, when the sensational hook becomes the first object of scrutiny, not the final verdict. Now place the famous word itself before the court. What would have to be documented for banned to survive examination? Was there a formal prohibition, some other form of withholding, a delay of uncertain cause, or a controversy later hardened into mythology? The record must answer. And where the record falls silent, certainty must fall silent with it. Then let us establish the rules of proof. The supplied evidence recognizes controversy surrounding the book, but it provides no primary publication record establishing that any authority formally banned the manuscript for 70 years. No documented order is presented. No responsible prohibiting body is identified. No dated act begins the alleged period, and no corresponding act ends it. The strongest popular claim, therefore, exceeds what this record can presently carry. That is not a declaration that nothing happened. It is a declaration that different events require different evidence. Begin with the most modest proposition. A manuscript existed. Next, publication did not occur for a period. Next, someone objected to its contents. Next, someone with control over the manuscript chose not to publish it. Finally, an authority imposed a formal prohibition preventing publication. These propositions may be related, but they are not identical. Proof of one does not silently prove the rest. A manuscript can remain unpublished without an official ban. An objection can influence a decision without becoming a prohibition. A private choice to withhold can produce a long delay without establishing organized suppression. Even genuine controversy does not identify who acted, by what mechanism, on what date, with what authority, or for how long. Those details are not decorative. They are the claim. If you say the work was controversial, you must support controversy. If you say it was withheld, you must identify, where possible, who withheld it. If you say it was formally banned, you assume a heavier burden. Name the authority, show the instrument of prohibition, establish the relevant dates, and connect that documented act to the asserted duration. 70 years is not merely a dramatic span. It is a historical measurement demanding a traceable beginning and end. The material identified as E13 demonstrates that a successful modern explainer can examine the controversy and contradictions while still treating Hill's broader ideas as worthy of serious attention. That balanced posture matters. Refusing an unearned historical conclusion is not contempt for the author. Respect for an idea is compatible with refusing to certify every legend surrounding it. Now guard against the opposite mistake. The absence of primary support in the supplied packet does not prove that no further document exists anywhere. We cannot convert an incomplete record into a universal negative, but neither may we convert the possibility of undiscovered evidence into permission to speak as though discovery has already occurred. Possibility is not documentation. Suspicion is not a finding. Honesty, therefore, requires calibrated language. Some matters are supported, some are plausible, some are interpretive, some are marketed, some remain unresolved. Keep those labels attached to the claims they describe, and the inquiry stays free. Remove them, and uncertainty is dressed as revelation. The present verdict is measured. Controversy may be acknowledged in general, but a formal 70-year ban is not established by the evidence supplied. Until suitable records identify the agent, mechanism, documentary act, dates, and duration, the details remain open. And this ruling leads us to the words that have been made to impersonate one another: banned, suppressed, withheld, and delayed. They do not tell the same story. Our next duty is to stop pretending that they do. Precision begins where emotional language ends. If these four terms are allowed to blur together, a modest historical fact can acquire an actor, a motive, and an authority that the evidence never supplied. But once each word is required to show its credentials, the fog begins to lift. Delay is the narrowest description. It tells us only that publication occurred later rather than sooner. It measures an interval. It does not explain that interval. Delay may result from choice, circumstance, uncertainty, neglect, disagreement, legal concern, commercial judgment, or reasons the surviving record does not disclose. The calendar can establish passage. It cannot identify guilt. Withholding adds agency. It means that a rights holder, author, estate, publisher, or custodian possessing control over the material chose not to release it. That choice may have been voluntary or influenced by objection. It may have been cautious, strategic, personal, or unexplained. Yet withholding does not by itself prove coercion from outside. Control over release is not the same as being forbidden to release. Suppression is stronger still. It suggests purposeful obstruction, an actor taking steps to prevent, conceal, discourage, or materially hinder publication or circulation. Because the term carries intention, it requires evidence of intention expressed through conduct. Who obstructed? What action did that person or institution take? What connection can be shown between the act and the material's absence? Without those answers, suppression remains an interpretation, not an established event. A ban bears the greatest burden. It implies an identifiable authority imposing a prohibition through an identifiable mechanism. There should be some trace of the power asserted and the restriction imposed. An order, rule, directive, agreement, threat backed by authority, or other record capable of demonstrating that publication was prohibited rather than merely declined. A ban is not simply a stronger synonym for delay. It is a different kind of claim. Now observe how legends grow without requiring a single deliberate liar. The work was not published. In retelling, it was withheld. With another repetition, withholding becomes suppression. Then suppression is compressed into the most dramatic word of all, banned. Each step supplies more agency, more conflict, more certainty. Each step also demands more evidence. Language escalates easily. Proof does not. Apply 4 questions whenever the claim appears. Who acted? What exactly was done? Where is that action recorded? How is the stated duration calculated? If the answer to any question is unknown, mark it unknown. Do not fill an empty space with the most exciting explanation available. For the supplied material, those answers remain insufficient to certify a formal 70-year prohibition. Controversy can responsibly be discussed. Delayed publication can be acknowledged. Other descriptions may remain possible pending stronger documentation, but possibility must retain its proper name. This is the first defense against both promotional exaggeration and cynical dismissal. Say precisely what the evidence permits, then stop. A long interval may invite inquiry, but mystery is not a legal act, and elapsed time is not an oppressor. With the historical categories separated, another question can finally be asked on its own terms. If the book's theatrical encounter cannot testify to what happened in history, can it still reveal something true about the mind that reads it? Yes, but only when we ask the drama to perform the work of drama. The imagined adversary is not valuable because it can verify who delayed a manuscript or certify what happened during an undocumented interval. Its value lies elsewhere. It gathers temptation, fear, conformity, indecision, and mental surrender into a single voice, a voice the reader can hear, question, resist, and finally recognize. That is the power of personification. An invisible habit is difficult to confront because it rarely announces itself as a habit. It arrives as a reasonable postponement, a borrowed opinion, a fear dressed as caution, a surrender disguised as convenience. Give that pattern a voice, a strategy, and an objective, and what was vague becomes visible. The opponent on the page becomes a device for detecting the opponent within conduct. But establish the interpretive contract before entering the scene. Dramatic force is not documentary force. A character's declaration may be memorable without being verified, psychologically suggestive without being universally true, and personally useful without proving the legend attached to the book. The encounter can illuminate behavior. It cannot authenticate publication history. There are 3 ways to hear the adversarial voice. The first is as literal assertion. This is how reality operates, and these statements describe binding laws. That reading bears the heaviest burden, because certainty spoken by a character does not demonstrate certainty in the world. The second is symbolic diagnosis. The voice concentrates familiar pressures into one recognizable figure. The third is motivational provocation. The voice is designed to disturb your comfort, sharpen your attention, and force an answer from you. The first reading demands evidence. The second demands interpretation. The third demands self-examination. Confuse them, and theater begins masquerading as proof. Separate them, and the theater becomes useful again. You are therefore not required to choose between kneeling before the device and rejecting it altogether. You may refuse its unsupported absolutes while accepting its invitation to observe yourself. You may question every sweeping claim while noticing the smaller, harder truth concealed inside the performance. Human beings do surrender decisions, repeat inherited opinions, obey unexamined fears, and postpone purposeful action. The scene need not establish a universal law to make a recurring behavior recognizable. Listen then on 2 levels at once. With one ear, test the claims. Ask what is asserted, what is supported, what is exaggerated, and what remains metaphor. With the other, listen for recognition. Where do you differ? Because deciding is uncomfortable. Where do you imitate? Because standing apart has a cost. Where do you call passivity, patience, confusion, openness, or fear, prudence? A parable may tell the truth about your choices without becoming a deposition about history. That distinction rescues both judgment and curiosity. The dramatic opponent is not a witness to the manuscript's past. It is a mirror held before the reader's present. And once you look into that mirror, the next question is no longer whether the character possesses secret authority. It is whether you can identify the ordinary pattern the character was created to expose. The slow transfer of judgment from your own mind to habit, fear, environment, and the opinions of others. That pattern has a name in the book's vocabulary. It is drifting. Drifting begins at the moment influence is permitted to complete the work that judgment was meant to do. It does not require a mysterious power. It requires only that repetition. Assign your conclusions. Fear, assign your limits. Habit, assign your attention. Or surrounding voices, assign your purpose. The mind drifts whenever it rents out the labor of judgment. Watch how quietly the transaction occurs. You see a headline calling a book forbidden, and you accept the emotional charge without examining the term. You repeat a claim because people in your circle recognize it as a sign of belonging. Or you discover that one celebrated assertion appears inflated, then dismiss the entire work without testing anything else it contains. In each case, a conclusion arrives before inquiry has finished. Admiration can drift. Contempt can drift. This is why the controversy matters beyond publication history. It catches the reader in the very act the book warns against. A person may praise a work about independent thought while repeating word for word the promotional language used to sell it. The message says, examine the forces shaping your mind. The marketing says, prove your independence by accepting this legend. If you obey the second in the name of the first, independence has become a costume. But do not escape into the opposite costume. The believer who accepts everything is not thinking independently. Neither is the skeptic who rejects everything. One borrows certainty from enthusiasm. The other borrows certainty from disdain. Both may appear decisive. Both may merely be performing membership. The deepest defense against manipulation is therefore not joining the correct camp. It is reclaiming the work of choosing and testing. Ask yourself, did I reach this conclusion, or did I receive it already assembled? Have I defined the crucial terms? Have I inspected the support? Am I responding to the claim or protecting an identity built around accepting or rejecting it? You cannot control every influence that enters your field of attention. No one can. Family, culture, fear, desire, repetition, and social approval all exert pressure, often before you notice them. Agency does not mean becoming untouched by influence. It means practicing the decision about which influences deserve authority. Begin with 4 movements. Pause, define, inspect, decide. Pause before the emotional phrase recruits you. Define what its words would have to mean. Inspect what support is actually present. Decide with a confidence proportionate to that support. Then, remain willing to revise. That is not indecision. It is judgment under discipline. Now the inquiry turns. The legend has been separated from the work, and the reader has been separated from the easy identities of believer and skeptic. What remains must earn its place one principle at a time. Which ideas survive examination? Which promises reach beyond what experience can support? Which teachings become useful only after their absolutes are qualified? The next task is neither preservation nor destruction. It is selection. Selection begins with a change in posture. Stop asking whether the book deserves total allegiance. Ask what happens when one of its principles enters an ordinary day. Does it clarify conduct? Does it produce useful feedback? Does it remain sound when circumstances resist it? A principle earns respect through application, not ceremony. Begin with definite purpose. A chosen aim can reduce aimless reaction by giving decisions a direction. When invitations compete, when inconvenience arrives, when distraction offers immediate relief, purpose helps you ask, does this serve what I have decided to build? But purpose is not a guarantee of success. It cannot command circumstances, erase uncertainty, supply missing ability, or make every goal worthy. It organizes effort. It does not rule outcomes. Independent thought survives as well, provided it is treated as a practice rather than a personality. It is not automatic disagreement. It is not the performance of being difficult, exceptional, or immune to influence. It is the repeated work of defining language, examining support, comparing explanations, and correcting conclusions when better reasons appear. The contrarian is still controlled if opposition has become a reflex. Independent judgment chooses when to agree, when to refuse, and when to remain undecided. Then consider disciplined attention. Your time will be claimed unless you claim it deliberately. Messages, appetites, interruptions, and obligations compete for the hours from which a chosen aim must be built. Discipline means returning attention repeatedly to what deserves it. It does not require perfect concentration or permanent withdrawal. It requires boundaries, deciding what enters, what waits, and what receives no further portion of the day. Environment matters because repetition matters. Companions can normalize courage or resignation. Messages can enlarge a possibility or keep rehearsing defeat. Routines can make constructive action easier or make avoidance almost effortless. Yet influence is not destiny. No environment wholly explains every choice, and no improved environment eliminates responsibility. Change what surrounds you where you can. Where you cannot, become more conscious of the pressure it applies. Action completes the sequence. Intention alone can preserve an idea in flattering perfection because reality has never answered it. Action exposes assumptions. It reveals missing skill, hidden cost, genuine progress, and necessary revision. Take a bounded step, observe the result, adjust, and act again. Action is not proof that desire must prevail. It is the bridge from desire to information. Now apply 3 filters to every principle. First, is it internally coherent, or does it defeat itself when followed? Second, can its usefulness be observed in practice, not merely felt during inspiration, but recognized in decisions and consequences? Third, what limits, distortions, or harms appear when it is declared absolute? A useful tendency can become a damaging command when exceptions are forbidden. This is how wisdom is salvaged without granting infallibility. Keep purpose as direction, thought as examination, attention as stewardship, environment as influence, and action as experiment. Hold them firmly enough to practice and lightly enough to revise. You do not honor a principle by kneeling before it. You honor it by putting it to work and watching what it does. Yet a harder test now approaches. If the book demands independent judgment, does its own forceful method always permit that judgment, or does the message sometimes challenge the very freedom it claims to defend? That question must be answered without defensiveness. The modern treatment, identified as E13, offers a useful model. It addresses the book's controversy and contradictions while continuing to take its broader ideas seriously. Nothing more specific should be claimed from that evidence. Yet the posture itself matters. Examination need not become hostility, and appreciation need not demand protection from criticism. Begin with the voice of command. The book urges you to think independently, yet often delivers its ideas through a dramatic authority that speaks with immense certainty. Can such a voice awaken judgment? Yes. A forceful challenge can interrupt complacency and make familiar excuses newly visible. But can the same voice discourage judgment? Yes, again. When intensity is mistaken for proof, the reader may exchange one borrowed authority for another. The contradiction is not automatically fatal. It is a test. Ask the voice what it would ask of every competing influence. Why should I believe you? What supports this conclusion? Where are the limits? What would cause revision? If the teaching welcomes those questions, its demand for independence becomes credible. If it requires submission while praising freedom, its method has turned against its message. Now test the sharp oppositions. A dramatic argument gains force by dividing purpose from drift, courage from fear, decision from surrender. Such contrast can expose evasions. But life does not always divide so neatly. A person may be constrained without having surrendered, uncertain without being weak, delayed without being passive. Illness, obligation, limited resources, conflicting duties, and incomplete knowledge can restrict action without proving a failure of character. Agency matters. Context matters also. Compassion is not an excuse for abandoning responsibility. Responsibility is not permission to erase complexity. The same discipline applies to revelation-style rhetoric. A voice that claims to uncover hidden control can produce exhilarating certainty. It can make suspicion feel like sight and emotional recognition feel like verification. But skepticism toward influence must include skepticism toward the rhetoric that teaches skepticism. Otherwise, the reader becomes vulnerable at the exact moment of feeling invulnerable. Not every tension deserves the same verdict. Some contradictions invite refinement. Preserve the central insight, narrow the claim, define its conditions. Other defects require rejection because the proposition remains incoherent, unsupported, or harmful after qualification. Mature judgment does not rescue everything, and it does not discard everything. It separates. So restate each principle in language capable of surviving reality. Do not say that purpose guarantees achievement. Say that purpose can organize effort. Do not say that every obstacle reveals surrender. Say that choices remain meaningful within constraints. Do not treat confidence as evidence. Let confidence propose, evidence test, context limit, compassion humanize, and revision correct. This is critical appreciation, and it is stronger than reverence. You may value the provocation without defending every absolute. You may disagree with Hill without betraying the demand for agency. Indeed, a book that teaches you to think for yourself must survive the moment you think for yourself about the book. The contradictions have now done their work. They have separated usable counsel from rhetorical excess. But outside this examination, a more compressed story continues to travel, a controversial manuscript, a long delay, one hidden force, one decisive word. What happens when a complicated history is reduced to the cleanest promotional sentence possible? The answer begins with compression. A complicated sequence is reduced until uncertainty disappears and conflict takes its place. Unpublished becomes withheld. Withheld becomes suppressed. Suppressed becomes banned. Then the span between composition and release is treated as the duration of the alleged ban. This is an analytical model of escalation, not a claim that the publication history followed those steps. Notice what each step adds. Unpublished gives you chronology, but no explanation. Withheld supplies a decision maker. Suppressed supplies resistance and apparent danger. Banned supplies authority, prohibition, and a villain. Add the promise that you are among those finally discovering the concealed work, and the audience receives a role as well. You are no longer merely reading a book. You are entering a circle of people who supposedly know what others were not meant to know. That is why the shorter account can feel more complete than the careful one. It answers every dramatic question at once. Who acted? An opposing force. Why was there a delay? Because the message was dangerous. Why can you read it now? Because concealment failed. What does your interest say about you? That you are alert enough to recognize the secret. The story offers mystery, conflict, villainy, and initiation in one compact frame. The E7 material provides bounded evidence that such discovery-oriented framing attracted measurable attention within the cited content set. It records a 51,387 view explanation, a 21,705 view band interview framing, and a 10,142 view manuscript story. Those figures establish interest in those presentations. They do not establish why each person watched, whether viewers believe the claims, whether the framing caused the attention, or whether the history asserted is true. They prove neither deception nor innocence. They reveal no private motive belonging to a publisher, creator, estate, or anyone else. Keep 4 questions separate. What attracts attention? What serves promotion? What is historically accurate? What did a particular actor intend? These questions may intersect, but none answers the others automatically. Audience demand can make a phrase useful without making it false. Promotional usefulness can encourage repetition without proving deliberate invention. Historical insufficiency can require restraint without proving that no stronger record exists. Marketing mythology does not need to erase a real controversy. It need only simplify it. Disagreement, hesitation, delay, and uncertain custody can remain underneath, while public memory preserves the most dramatic label. The controversy may be genuine. The summary may still exceed it. Salesmanship prefers one charged word. Truth often requires 4 careful distinctions. The opening hook has therefore changed its function. Forbidden is no longer a revelation to receive, but a frame to inspect. The legend may be culturally powerful, even though the supplied evidence does not establish a formal 70-year ban. Popularity can explain how a claim travels. It cannot certify where the claim began or what occurred. Now you must render the final verdict. Preserve uncertainty where the record is silent. Preserve value where examination has earned it. And decide how a sovereign reader will act the next time a legend asks to think on your behalf. Here's the verdict. The supplied evidence does not establish that this book was formally banned for 70 years. It supports discussion of controversy, delayed publication, later promotional framing, and modern interest. It leaves the precise publication history unresolved. Stronger primary documentation could alter that judgment. But a document not yet produced cannot carry a claim today. Discipline requires neither denial nor belief. It requires proportion. What then remains after the mythology has been removed? The dramatic adversary remains useful as a mirror of fear, conformity, indecision, and surrendered judgment, not as testimony about historical events. Purpose can organize effort. Attention can be directed. Independent thought can be practiced. Influence can be examined. Action can convert intention into experience. Each principle may be tested without accepting the legend that surrounds it, and each may be retained without granting the book authority over everything it touches. But other things must be refused passage. Refuse the inflation that turns delay into prohibition without evidence. Refuse certainty borrowed from admirers or critics. Refuse promises that become absolute precisely where reality demands qualification. Above all, refuse the childish bargain that says a work must be defended whole or discarded whole. Judgment separates. It keeps, limits, revises, and rejects. Give that judgment 5 minutes today. Write the claim exactly as presented. Define its strongest word, not what the word suggests emotionally, but what would have to be true for it to be accurate. Mark what the evidence directly supports. Label every inference, interpretation, and unknown. Then choose one useful action that does not depend upon complete certainty. Ask for the document. Withhold repetition. Test the principle. Revise the conclusion. Take the next bounded step. Do this whenever a claim arrives wrapped in secrecy, urgency, prestige, outrage, or belonging. The stronger its attempt to seize your identity, the more calmly you examine its credentials. You are not trying to become impossible to influence. You are becoming deliberate about what receives authority. Now answer plainly. Will you repeat what you cannot distinguish? Will you surrender a useful idea merely because its legend is weak? Will you defend an entire work because one teaching helped you? Will you condemn every principle because one historical claim failed its burden? Will you test before you testify? The forbidden story promised access to concealed knowledge. The more valuable discovery is the discipline by which you judge every such promise. Victory is not proving that your first reaction was correct. Victory is making your judgment harder to capture. Say it in the present tense. I examine before I repeat. I believe in proportion to evidence. I revise without humiliation. I keep what survives testing, release what does not, and act purposefully amid uncertainty. My mind is not closed, and it is not for hire. It is awake, responsible, and my own